While Larry was out of town visiting family, the HOA president welded his front gate shut over a fake grass violation. Brent Calloway, drunk on power, thought no one would question his stunt. But Larry came back with security footage, city inspectors, and a quiet plan that made headlines. And just wait until you see how the law and the cameras turned this petty abuse into public justice. Larry McCauley hadn't even made it to his front door when something stopped him cold. His gate, the same wrought iron entrance he'd walked through for the past 15 years, was sealed shut with a thick steel padlock, welded directly to the latch. A faded orange notice flapped in the breeze, taped crookedly to the gate with a line of duct tape. The words "Violation Access Restricted" were printed in bold, all caps. Underneath, someone had scribbled in black marker, "Grass height exceeds code. Property non-compliant." Larry stared. His rolling suitcase dropped onto the gravel driveway. He was home, but he couldn't get in. The front of the house, his house, looked like it had been condemned. The sight didn't just confuse him, it jolted him. There were no warning letters, no calls, no signs of any emergency, just a lock, a message, and silence. Down the block, an older neighbor named Glenn peeked over his porch railing. "Hey, Larry," he called out hesitantly. "They said your grass went past 6 inches while you were gone." "Some rule, I guess. Brent came by with a couple of board folks. Welded it shut 2 days ago." Larry turned slowly toward the voice, still trying to process the words. His yard was xeriscaped, layered gravel, native shrubs, and heat-tolerant plants. There was barely any grass, and what little lawn there was got clipped by a professional crew every other Thursday like clockwork. He stepped back, looked around. His hedges were trimmed, his mailbox clean. There wasn't a single overgrown patch in sight. The violation wasn't just absurd, it was fabricated. The worst part? Someone had taken the time to bring tools, seal the lock, and make it personal. It wasn't enforcement. It was retaliation. And Larry, standing in the quiet afternoon sun with his hands clenched around a set of useless house keys, knew it wasn't just about the grass. Something deeper had just crossed a line. Brent Calloway wasn't just the HOA president. He acted like he was the mayor of a private kingdom. He drove around the neighborhood in his spotless white SUV, clipboard always in hand, barking compliance reminders to anyone who so much as left a trash bin out 10 minutes past pickup. For Brent, the HOA wasn't about community. It was about control. He prided himself on raising standards, though more than a few residents had other words for it. Larry had never been the type to cause trouble. But 6 months ago, during an HOA meeting in the clubhouse, Brent had unveiled a budget reallocation plan that cut funds for emergency preparedness and redirected them toward decorative signage for the front gate. Larry, a retired fire chief, stood up and questioned it, calmly, respectfully, and backed by logic. Brent hadn't forgotten. Ever since, Larry noticed the little things. Anonymous notes about weed growth, repeated inspections, HOA emails mysteriously skipping his inbox. Now, it wasn't subtle anymore. The grass violation was a sham. Larry checked the notice again. It wasn't even signed. No ordinance code, no timestamp, just vague language and a bold headline. The padlock wasn't a standard HOA-issued tag. It was the kind of thing you'd buy from a hardware store. And the weld marks? Sloppy amateur work. Not anything an official contractor would leave behind. This wasn't policy. This was personal. Word started to spread. A few neighbors mentioned seeing Brent and 2 other board members, Tom and Sheila, walking around Larry's property with tools in hand, days before he got back. No prior notice, no formal process. They'd trespassed, tampered with private access, and left a mark for everyone to see. Larry stood in his driveway that evening, arms crossed, jaw tight. "They shut me out of my own home," he muttered to himself, "like I'm some kind of criminal. They didn't just violate a rule, they tried to humiliate me." Inside, behind that locked gate, were his medical files, his fire department memorabilia, even his dog's food. The gate wasn't just steel, it was a message, and Larry was ready to send one back. Larry could have called a locksmith, could have brought out bolt cutters, could have made a scene. But he didn't. Instead, just after sunrise the next morning, he shaved, tucked his fire department badge pin onto his collared shirt, and walked into the county sheriff's office with a manila folder under his arm. There was no anger in his voice, just clarity. "I need to file a report for criminal trespass and unlawful tampering," he said calmly at the front desk. Inside the folder were copies of his property deed, his HOA's own architectural guidelines, and a notarized maintenance contract from his landscaping company showing bi-weekly service, signed and dated. But the flash drive he slid across the counter was the key. The deputy plugged it in. The footage was sharp, time-stamped. It showed 3 people, Brent Calloway front and center, pushing open Larry's gate in broad daylight, lugging in tools, and proceeding to weld a padlock to the latch. No badge, no city uniform, just polo shirts and a level of confidence that came from assuming nobody would question them. By 11 a.m., a sheriff's cruiser and a city building inspector's van were parked in front of Larry's home. The gate was still locked, still scarred by Brent's handiwork, but now it was the center of official attention. Yellow flags marked the tampering points. A clipboard flipped. Camera crews appeared across the street. Larry watched from his porch with quiet focus as the deputy made a call. 10 minutes later, Brent himself pulled up in his usual SUV, stepping out with that familiar look, chest out, chin up, like he'd come to restore order. What he didn't expect was a deputy walking directly toward him. The officer didn't shout. He didn't gesture. He simply asked, loud enough for the news microphone to catch, "Do you have legal authority to weld someone else's private gate shut while they're out of state?" Brent opened his mouth, but nothing came out. The silence was louder than any siren. That evening, the story led the 6 o'clock news. Channel 9 didn't bury the footage. They opened with it. Brent Calloway clearly visible in crisp daylight, welding torch in hand, flanked by 2 HOA board members. The clip cut to the sealed gate, the orange notice, and a narrator's voice that made no attempt to soften the facts. Community board members caught on camera sealing off a homeowner's access while he was out of town, without permits, without warning, and without legal authority. The neighborhood watched from living rooms and dinner tables. Some shook their heads. Others, quietly fed up with the HOA's tactics, took a silent breath of relief. By morning, the city building inspector filed 2 citations against the HOA, one for unlicensed construction activity, the other for unauthorized interference with private residential access. The sheriff's department followed with a formal letter of warning. While it stopped short of criminal charges, for now, it made clear that any future incidents could result in legal action. The letter was delivered both to Brent and to the HOA legal advisor. The pressure mounted fast. Board members distanced themselves. Emails started flying. Brent didn't show up to the Thursday HOA meeting. By Saturday, a folded resignation letter was quietly taped to the community center door. No farewell speech, no apology, just a single line. Effective immediately, I resign my position as president of the Pine Brook Estates HOA. Meanwhile, at Larry's home, city workers arrived to remove the welded hardware. They brought power tools and a flatbed truck. The gate was carefully reopened, the lock dismantled without further damage. A Channel 9 van was parked across the street, broadcasting it live. The same reporter from the original segment stood beside Larry, who watched the entire process with his arms loosely folded and a patient calm on his face. He hadn't asked for attention. He hadn't raised his voice. But now, standing beside his unlocked gate, he looked every bit like the man who won, not just the legal battle, but the respect of the neighborhood. When the reporter turned to him with a microphone and asked the question, "Mr. McCauley, are you planning to sue the HOA?" Larry didn't hesitate. He cracked a subtle smile, the first anyone had seen since the incident. "I'm not a petty man," he said, "but I do believe in fire code, and retaliatory welding? That's definitely not in it." The crew chuckled. The reporter nodded. The camera caught it all. Behind Larry, his dog barked from the porch. The wind rustled through his carefully maintained desert plants, exactly as his landscaping contract promised. And as the city workers packed up and the news van pulled away, Larry finally turned toward his house, key in hand. Not a single thing had changed inside his home. But outside, Everything was different. Justice had come. And it didn't need a gavel. It came with a spotlight,